Hi guy, welcome to the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and for this week we're going to be covering HeroQuest, and this is episode 19. God, we are really racking that number out now. Now, as always, before we jump into the main game, I'd just like to say that for HeroQuest in particular, this is probably one of the biggest amount of research I've ever done on one of the shows. I mean, I spent hours on this, and it was great, just the amount of info that was available for it as a game. I mean, the show notes themselves are a thing of beauty. They are available to Patreon supporters. Just pop over to patreon.com/AMIGArama or go to AMIGArama.com and follow the links on there. In other news, I saw a game that's just come out, which was mentioned over on vintageisthenewOld.com. There will be a link in the description, as always. But basically, this game is called Elfie the Unicorn, which is a family-friendly Amiga game. And looking at it straight away, it looks a bit like Mario Brothers, but with nice big bright colourful flowers and this pony that looks like basically something off My Little Pony. It stood out to me as very odd when I saw it. I thought I had to mention it. But just reading the blurb, Elfie the Unicorn is a classic run and jump platformer aimed at younger children by Foxman, which is Twin Game Software. They must have done a fair few. The game was created using a real Amiga, and it's looking very nice indeed. Check out the full trailer video below, and there is one listed. Game has been a work in progress for some time, but we have some good news for you. Foxman emailed the site to say that the full version's release is very, very soon. Oh, so this is a demo. I mean, I've been misdirected there, but it basically said it's a game made especially for kids, 100% Amiga made, lots of enemies, exclusive soundtrack and graphics, day and night level, Kickstarter 3.x and 68020. So it's all original hardware. It looked from what I'm looking at, it does actually look quite good, so it's probably worth a download or a trial, whatever you want to call it. Now, another game I've been looking at on a site is Indie Retro News again. I do get an awful lot of my news from there. It's a great site though, so it's well worth bookmarking if you do go over there. It's called Invia. I don't know if I pronounced that right. INVIYYA. Anyway, this has basically been in development from some time, since about October 2016. It's an R-type style shooter. They're coming well along with it now. It's not too far off from release. Some are saying possibly summer. I'll stick a link into the description, but it's well worth going there just to have a look at that trailer. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's really like a sci-fi type shooter. They're colourful graphics. You got things that look like snails and aliens and these proper like Alien the Film type. Is it HR Gaga? That sort of background to it floating on behind it. Very, very interesting. Well, yeah, what a weird thing to finish on. Now, as always, I am constantly on the lookout for letters and comments and emails and things. So if anybody has any game suggestions, please drop me a line at lorfarius@amigarama.com. I'm always looking for Amiga experiences or histories, especially when we've done so many games now. There must be some out there who've been playing them quite a lot or have memories from back in the day, because I'd love to do either a special episode about it or just open the episodes a bit more out to people who are listening. I mean, I'm doing quite well on the listening figures so far, so I know there's some of you out there. Don't be shy, just come and drop us a line. For this week's game, we're going to go with HeroQuest. Now, this was a request put in by Amiga Island. Now, they actually run a monthly podcast. I do listen to it myself. It's actually quite entertaining and quite good. It's all tied in with the Amiga Island event, which just finished, I think it was middle of January. Anyway, so yeah, they recommended this game for me. I mean, I'm familiar with it as a title in the sense that of the board game as a kid and everything, because it was all going on and the craze and all that stuff. So I approached this one with a bit of trepidation, because I was thinking, well, you know, it's just going to be your typical license game. It's not going to be anything fancy. And then as I started looking more and more into it, and I realised it's more of an RPG style, and it seemed to have a lot of rules and a lot of reading and stuff like that, and it sort of put me off for ages. And I've been dabbling in and out for quite some time, trying to think, well, when should I tackle it? And then just having a few days off work, and I sat down and I started playing it, and then I suddenly realised that, I need to cover this as soon as possible. Now, the game itself was published by Gremlin. It was developed by one of their spin-off companies called GBH Gold. It came out in 1991. I would read out a list of Gremlin games, but basically they were behind the likes of Zool. So many games came out from then. I would take about 5 hours just to read them all out. Now, HeroQuest was on one disc, and on release it was priced at $24.99, which isn't too bad for the time for a one disc game. Looking at some other advertisements from the time, weirdly, it seemed to jump around from price from about $24.99 to $27.99. I suppose it depends on your retailer. Very, very odd. Anyway, the guy who coded it all was Michael Hart. Now, he was involved with the sequel, HeroQuest 2, as well as the data discs. Another one called MiG-29 Fulcrum. Now, that's a flight simulator, and it's one I used to play to death as a kid. I was addicted to it. I just couldn't stop playing it. I mean, I'm going to have to return to that one day. I can't remember much about it. You know, I'm not obsessed with it. I mean, memory very, very vague, but I even remember buying a special joystick for it at the time and stuff. I think it was one of the ones I used to play with lots of mates. Anyway, another game he did was a Necronom. I'm not sure what that is. Space Crusade, so they must have really liked him with HeroQuest because they went back to him. And a strategy game, K240. Now, I've heard that's very, very popular. I've only looked at a few screenshots and stuff. I've not dug into it too far, but I think I am going to cover that at one point because, again, I'm just doing the research for this and I started looking at it and I thought that does actually look like quite a good game. It'd be worth dipping into. Now, the graphics were done by Jason Wilson. Now, he did the graphics for Laser Squad, I believe a very, very excellent action strategy game. Pac-Mania, that's the weird 3D-ish version, 2D, 2.5D maybe, it's not quite that, it's very odd. Shadow Warriors, I think that's the arcade game, isn't it? Yeah. Space Harrier 2, and I was looking at some of the games this guy worked on. There were lots and lots of Sega ones, too many to read out, but he was a really, really good, prolific graphics designer back in the day. He might even still be working on games, I don't know, I didn't go that too deep onto him. Music was Barry Leach or Lech, I'm not entirely sure, it might be my pronunciation, but he did tunes for the Humans games. I mean, there was loads of them, there was loads of spin-offs and expansions and sequels and two main ones. Lotus 2, which did surprise me because that's some very, very good music, and I did cover some of that in the AMIGArama music show. Silkworm, I think I used some of that music as well. I didn't realise it was the same guy. Space Crusade, Ultima 5. My God, this guy really, really is into some famous games. And Utopia. Now, I've seen that running, but I've never actually been... I've seen it online running, but I've never been able to get it working on the actual Amiga. None of the files have ever worked when I've tried it. So, but I believe that's supposed to be one of the greatest strategy games for the system. Now, one of the great things about HeroQuest back in the day, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with it, but it had this absolutely amazing cover, and it's so amazing that I'm going to use it as the picture for this week's podcast, because this was iconic back in the day. I mean, it was drawn by a chap called Les Edwards, and he did this in 1988. I mean, it's your typical, like, barbarian design. You can see the other characters in the background fighting off enemies in a dungeon and stuff, and there's flames and there's a low glow, and the guy, the barbarian stretched out about to strike, and it's very, very like Conan and that sort of that strong fantasy era. And one of the things it really does remind me of is the Conan film, and a lot of people joke about that, but because it's a Schwarzenegger film, early one of his. But it's actually one of my favourite films. I mean, maybe that's terrible, but and it's the first one. That's the one with Tulsa Doom and all the snakes and the mountain stuff. It's actually quite a serious film, and the fantasy and the way it's stretched out, and it's worth going back to if you think I'm crazy, especially hunting down the director's cut, because they put back in so much stuff which actually developed the character even more. I mean, there's parts in that movie where he's actually Conan. He's sat down right before a battle and he's talking about how it feels to go out in a battle and how he's dealing with a situation, and it really fleshes him out as a character. And it was just really odd that they cut it out of the theatrical. My God, I'm turning this into a movie podcast, but go and see it, man. Conan is awesome. Now, the board game itself was created by Milton Bradley, of course, in conjunction with Games Workshop. I couldn't really find out what the link was there. I mean, I think Milton Bradley just lifted loads of the story stuff straight from Games Workshop's other properties, and because they were involved in Warhammer and that sort of thing. It's got a very, very strong fantasy feel to it. But this came out, pretty much when Games Workshop was taking over the world. I mean, especially in the UK, they started to ride the wave of the whole Dungeons and Dragons craze, which pretty much was a huge thing at late 70s and all the way through the 80s and early 90s. I mean, you know, it affected so many like films, music, all the rest of it. It was everywhere. And one of the things they did produce, one of my favourite things, is a range of books called the Fighting Fantasy series. Now, there's over 60 of these books. I mean, that's quite a lot when you think about it. And they're basically, if you've not heard of them, like a choose-your-own-adventure style. You read a paragraph, it points you off to another page. And most of them are in a fantasy setting, but they do delve out into other things like science fiction and more modern stuff and horror things. And they're actually really, really entertaining. And I've been actually going through a full collection of them. I've got 22 at the moment, and I managed to get one signed by the man himself, Ian Livingston. I'm hoping I can get another one from Steve Jackson at some point, because that sounds terrible, but I always worry about trying to get things signed because it's so difficult these days, especially if they retire and they're not reachable anymore. Because I'd rather get something signed that's got my name attached to it. So, you know, isn't that bizarre? Yeah. Now, anyway, sorry, back to the board game, because explaining the board game pretty much explains the sort of rules behind the Amiga game. The board game had up to 5 players. One was like a dungeon master. He would control, like, say, the map and the monsters. There'd be up to 4 player characters. You could play it with less, but there'd be 4 characters of barbarian, dwarf, elf, and a wizard. I had this when I was 10 years old. I was absolutely addicted to it. I would play it constantly, and I can remember taking it into school several times as a little kid and playing this. And one of the things I always regretted as a kid, because I was just too young, let's say 9 or 10, and I couldn't paint anything to save my life, but I would have loved to have attempted to paint those figures, because later on, when I got to, it must have been about 18 or 19, I started getting into the Games Workshop miniatures, and I had a bit of a crack at just, tempting the models, and I did it for quite a few years, and I'm not amazing by any means, but I was quite pleased how far I got. It'd be great to go back and do something like that. It's time, isn't it? What can I say? But one of the great things about HeroQuest, especially then, it was probably my first proper introduction to like Dungeons and Dragons and fantasies as a concept, because I'd not seen Conan or anything by this point, and it really did hold my interest and draw me in. And I've always had a toe dabbled into fantasy stuff. I've been going on. God, I really am going off subject here. I'm getting back to the game, I promise. There was an add-on for this, like an add-on disc called Return of the Witch Lord. Now, that was a 2-disc expansion, which had 10 extra missions. You need the original game to play. It is literally just an expansion. And when this came out, it was $14.99, and it came out in the same year, so they were really, I think it was fairly popular when it came out. It was a pretty good seller. It did so well that it was ported to pretty much every system known to man. So you had PC, Atari ST, Spectrum, C64, even the Acorn Archimedes. So we had all computers there. There was no like consoles or anything like that, because it was probably too complicated really, and you needed, because it's all mouse driven, so you need to have your hand on the ball to play it that way. This is an isometric style game for the graphics. The story behind it is, well, I go and read some of these out, but when I went to the manual to read up on it, it was a couple of pages long, and as much as I'd love to sit here for probably about 17 hours reading this out, the summary of it is it's very fantasy driven. There's somebody invading something, and there's a witch lord, and that person needs to be defeated. But one of the good things about the game is it has a very fantastic graphic introduction with some movements of, and it tells the story as you come in, and you've got paragraphs and paragraphs of text, which is probably a downside towards the game straight away, because if you're not into that sort of fantasy realm, it can be quite a bit boring, I suppose, but I mean, I quite enjoyed it. You can click past it, by the way. It doesn't force you to see that every single time, like some games I have seen on the Amiga. I mean, I don't know why that even became a thing, where I think it was Wrath of the Demon I was playing recently, because I was testing it out as a possible episode, and I couldn't skip the opening, and every single time you died or something, I think you had to reset, and it would play the opening intro over and over and over again. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. Fair few games have done that. Now, the way the screen is laid out, so it's isometric view. Everything is driven by the mouse, and it's a single click. Straight away, I like that because it's very intuitive. It gets you straight in, and you've got a few icons on the screen. Now, you've got to me, it looks like a dice, but it's actually a spinning coin. And basically, you click this coin, it spins it up in the air, and then you get a number between 1 and 12, and that gives you a number of moves on the screen before you. And basically, you're in an area, you're locked in this area, you move up, down, left or right on a grid, and it's just like the board game. Depending on the number of moves you get, you can come up to a door, go inside, and then it'll open up, and then you can explore the room, or you can fight monsters, or carry on playing the game. Now, around the edge of the screen, down the right, you've got, I keep calling it the dice. It's always a dice in my mind. I've got too much D&D stuck in there. Basically, so you've got a spinning coin down there, you've got a map, and you've got the way to move. So you've got the 4 arrows, basically north, south, east, and west. Now, the map's actually quite neat and handy, because you are playing a version of the board game. When you click that, it fills the screen completely. Nice flat view of the map and all the rooms you've explored. And you can sort of work out where some of the secret rooms are, and as you're exploring, because that does come in handy later on. But the great thing about it is, as you're going out throughout the world and you're moving along and stuff, the map does actually open up, and as you look at the map and compare the two, it's actually quite big, and it becomes, you do have to flick through, not too often, but it gives you a good sense of where you are in the world. And the maps are never like absolutely huge and expansive and massive. It's not crazy like that. They're just compact enough that you're in a small enough area, but there's still enough reach out there to explore. God, doesn't that sound odd? With the game, there is 13 quests that I could see, and you have to tackle them in order. That's quite a huge list. 7 of which, from what I could tell, and I played through and I watched them back on video and stuff, and they seem to be based on the board game mission. I had a quick read through of some of the board game. I mean, I can't remember it from 20 odd. Jesus Christ, it's almost 30 years ago. Good God, and I just couldn't remember them. But just going back through a PDF of the whole thing with some of the maps and the ideas and games, I'm pretty sure that's what they were based on. Now, it can be quite easy when you start off. I found probably 6, maybe 7 levels, and it seems to be ones based on the board game. I don't think that's because it's just familiar. It's as if they try to push you towards the later levels, which are much bigger and are more involved. But at least as you get further in the game, the difficulty does actually start to increase. Now, it does look like the board game. Don't get me wrong on that. I mean, it is, of course, it's Amiga graphics, it's not real life, but the characters are quite well drawn. You can work out what everything is on the screen. There's good effects, sort of good animation. It's not 100% great there on the animation. I mean, some of it is repeated quite often, especially when you come to things like combat. But again, that's to be expected, really, because in effect, you are playing a board game. Now, hidden throughout every area. There's tons upon tons of items to find. One of the things I did realise as you were going on, when you enter a room, and I don't know if maybe I was playing it wrong, but if you stop and then do a search, and then you would, 9 times out of 10, you like find some sort of item. It's never anything major, but it might be like, say, a healing potion or something like that. But I found that it seemed to end the turn at that moment. So what I started doing was, if I would move into a room, say like 5 or 6 spaces, I would go on ahead, and then I would do the search and then finish my turn. Sorry, down the left hand side, I missed that bit, didn't I? I didn't explain that, but you've got a selection of there's a end turn button, inventory, which shows everything you carrying, a search button, a combat button, unlock, but it's basically set by a set of keys. And that's pretty much it. Nice, simple controls. I mean, I didn't even, the first time I played it through, I was really worried, but those icons just stand out straight away. It's obvious what they are, and you can work out within seconds what you need to do and where you want to. It's probably one of the best starting games to jump you in and draw you in and get you excited. There's lots and lots of it's classic style fantasy monsters, like things like orcs, knights, dark knights, that sort of things. Lots of typical, some skeletons dotted around there, that sort of stuff. One thing I did realise from the manual and a fair few reviews that I was reading, that it actually originally had a 4-player multiplayer. And of course I don't have access to that myself these days, or so I thought, but as I started looking into it, each player can choose a character, but when I went onto AMIGAlive.com, it's actually compatible with this as software. You can actually play full-on games of HeroQuest across the internet, basically as if you were in the same room on the Amiga, which was really, really interesting. And I'm actually quite tempted to try that out at some point, because that's one of the greater things I think about this, is it works quite well as a single-player game, but it probably work even better with a game with a group of people, because the turns will make more sense. You're swinging dice, coins back and forth all the time for moves. Another thing I did notice about it, there's lots and lots of secret rooms on maps. You can find tons and tons of weapons and items and potions dotted around. One of the simplest things was like a potion for strength and a potion for healing. They pretty much do what they say on the tin. When you come into, like I say, with a potion of strength, you come up to combat. You walk up to, say, an enemy, like it's an orc or a knight or something like that, and you press the attack button, and then it loads like a separate, a closer view with just you and the enemy. You see your energy bar and their energy bar. You attack, they attack, and it goes back and forth, and there's no real interaction at that point. It's pretty much automatic. You then end your turn if you kill them or you don't kill them, and you might be damaged. You can either then use a potion, re-roll the coin, spin the coin, take some more turns, and then come back and have another go at them. There is a shop in the game, but that's only accessible in between the missions or the quests. And basically everything in there is very, very expensive. And I think that the push is for you not really to rely on that. You can pick up some handy stuff like potions and things, but things like weapons and stuff are just ridiculously priced. But I think the idea behind the game is it's pushing you to explore the world, to go in rooms and examine chests and things. And because basically if you pick weapons up in the game, they're always better. And one of the other things I've realised that you really do have to search the levels, because as the levels progress, basically there's the main push behind it. You need to defeat a big baddie in that section before you can move on. And you move on by going out of an exit staircase. But you have to defeat this person. But the problem is, most of the time that you need a specific magic weapon or a certain tool to get past them, depending on your character. But what that ends up being is you can get to a point where you're stuck in a part of the game and you think, God, I didn't explore better in that. So you can actually go back and then re-explore. And it's quite interesting how it lets you do the exploration if you want, or if you save up enough, you can buy right sort of weapon and probably force your way through later on. So there's a bit of a chance there. But the thing is, the enemies themselves, as the game goes on, you do need these magic weapons, so it's always worth exploring each dungeon floor as thoroughly as possible. I mean, every mission seemed to be set this way. Of course, all 4 characters have come over from the board game. The barbarian and the dwarf, they're basically just fighters. Nothing too fantastic. One's a bit stronger and tougher than the other. I mean, I always tend to use the barbarian, but that's just a style thing I always tend to go for in role-playing games. I know I'm probably crazy, but the wizard and elf, I found, I did play with those. They do have different capabilities, like they have access to spells, but the thing is you have a limited number of spells per quest, and once you've used it, that's pretty much it, and it's a lot tougher for them in fights, and I thought as I was playing, I think you're better off finishing the game as the dwarf, the barbarian, and then coming back later and replaying it as those, because they are weak characters, but they play in a different way. Then it makes it's more interesting. Like, sorry, the elf he uses magic and he can fight better up close in the combat, so it does make for a good mix, and it gives you an opportunity to come back to the game and replay it several times over. I mean, there's not really that much difference, I suppose, across the game as a whole, but adding that different element of choosable characters makes it more interesting. There were lots and lots of sound effects dotted throughout. I really like that about this one. Steps and the swords for the combat and the clashing and the clanging. You know, it sounds like a very Dungeons and Dragons type themed game. And like when somebody dies, there's like a scream in the background. It's really well done, and it really does set the theme. Now the music itself that plays through the game, it's pretty much on a loop. There's a couple, probably 2 or 3 tunes I think that are played repeatedly, but they are quite long, and I actually found that it fitted the atmosphere very, very well. But the thing is, they're not just playing constantly. There are quiet moments where it lulls and goes down for a bit, and then you just think, and it's a very good use of repeat music, and it never becomes boring. And I can hear that pretty much from any point and just think, yeah, that's a really, really good tune, and it matches the game brilliantly. And that's the thing with music, especially with the sound effects. You want it to be able to set that atmosphere and to draw you in. And one of the greatest things about this is, especially for what it is you can save your game. You can save your characters to disk to tackle different things. They do actually, they level up to a degree as you're exploring with weapons and things, and it's good that because you're not going to finish this on a single playthrough. Of course, this does have its issues. I'm trying to take a deeper look at these games, and I always do try and pick on what I think are problems. I mean, I did find with this, it was quite a pleasant surprise. I mean, there wasn't really that much to complain about. I mean, the controls are quite simple. It was very easy to pick up and play. I never got stuck. I really didn't have to read them. And I mean, I did later just to go through it and see what it was like, but it was completely pointless. It could have been much shorter. They could have saved themselves the money, because the game is just pretty much self-explanatory. Even though at first when you look, you think, God, there's loads and loads and loads of buttons. But the fact is, you're using symbols, and it's not complicated. It's not like full RPG and piles of text, and you have to do this, that, and the other one. It all just, you walk up to a door and you press like the unlock button, it opens the door. You go into a room, you press the search button, it searches the room, and then you'll get a pop-up message on the screen saying, okay. Now you can't play this on the joystick. From what I've seen online, I haven't completed it yet. I am having a bloody good go though. I'm about 3 hours into on my playthrough, and I'm playing this myself. I think I'm up to about level 10 at mission 10. Quest 10. Yeah. But some of the run-throughs I've seen online seem to put it at around about 4.5 to 5 hours. So for one disc, that's a hell of a lot of content going on. And the fact that you can save your games means you can dip in and out of it. I mean, I've been doing that myself over several nights and been having a great time. Now, I did think that I thought that the beginning of the game would be nice and easy, because most games are, because they have to introduce the player and teach them how the systems work and stuff. But this seemed to go on, the difficulty was very, very easy for quite a long time, and it just felt odd. I don't know what they could have done, but maybe improved the combat for it to some degree, made it tougher to get through sections, but they were passable, and they were enjoyable enough. But when you start getting to later levels and it fleshes it out more, and there's more to do, and there's more to search and better enemies to fight and stuff, it just starts working better. One of the biggest problems I did have with it is there's no real problems with the combat itself. It's nice, simple. It's like the board game. You go up to something, you're spinning your coin for moves and attack points and stuff. Sorry, I'm overcomplicating that there, because it isn't even that. You go up to somebody, you press the attack button, you select the person on the map usually in front of you, and you do an attack. You either hit or you miss. They have a go, and then that's it. It goes back to the main play screen, and it's do that ad infinity. But I mean, the problem I did have there is I got into a situation, I think it was about Quest 3, where it was just this, it was an orc, and I just couldn't get any hits in, and I just kept missing, and I got stuck in, it was like I was almost stuck in a loop, and it took about 4 or 5 spins of the coin to actually hit him and take him down, and I don't know I suppose that's not really a bug, because it's just depending on that random chance, but it seemed a bit drawn out and a bit silly, and I just think they could have maybe done something to add to the original game's combat, because I don't think people would have minded too much if they made that sort of a change. You do need to use potions to heal. I said that earlier. You can get fair few just to boost the abilities, but the entire game is based around that rolling of the coin and spinning it up in the air. There is actually quite a good animation on the coin. I don't think I've said that. You basically, when you click it, a little coin flicks up in the air, spins and lands, and then it comes up with your number. Yeah. Add to that, you've got a very well written manual. Like I say, it's completely pointless though, so that goes against the game. You've got to have some bad points, and I'm marking you down on the manual. What can I say? At the time, the magazines were quite kind to this. The One gave it 91%, Amiga Action 87%, Amiga Format 85%, CU Amiga 81%, I think that was the lowest I could find at the time, Amiga Computing 90%, and a few of these did re-review it a couple of years later, and none of them really dropped that score. I mean, it's a good, I can understand why they've gone with that. It's a good, solid game, but, first of all, what a game. Absolutely incredible. I had a blast playing this. I came to it with some intrepidation, thinking this is going to be really in-depth and deep, and it's going to, I'm going to have problems. It's like when I look at other RPGs, like, say, what are they called? The Baldur's Tale RPG, because I want to cover games like that, but I'm really worried that I'll have to sink so much time into it. Like with Dungeon Master, I was obsessed with it, absolutely obsessed with it. And the problem with me is, I've only got really a week to cover these games, and if I get too obsessed with them, it starts cutting into my playtime, and then it's like, well, what am I going to do about next week's episode? And it's like, let's cancel it, let's have a Dungeon Master for next part 2. But I can't keep doing it, So, but, I got into this. It isn't like that at all. It flows brilliantly. It controls really well. It's dead easy to get into, and once you go in, there's enough content there to keep you driving on and on. I mean, I never tried the Amiga version back in the day. It just something I might have maybe dabbled in the Spectrum, but I never really got into it on a computer. So this was one hell of a surprise. I mean, I've already lost umpteen hours to this. I was playing it last night for about 2 hours, and I didn't really complete a quest. I was just wandering around and having fun and exploring and things, and I really loved the size of the world, and I will be carrying on playing this. That's the great thing about it, and I'm quite looking forward to getting into the expansion disc and the sequel. Again, I'll have to complete the main game first, and next week's episode might suffer slightly. I might just pick an easier game to cover. What can I say? The sound effects and the music, and it really, really mixes in with the gameplay. I mean, I say the combat isn't great, but it's good enough. It's more than passable, and it's enjoyable enough. The combat is not a huge part of the game. It's just part. it's part of the exploration and things you see, so it's not great, it's not amazing. A bit like The Immortal. I don't know if anyone else has seen that game before. It's a bit hands-off. It could have been tweaked to make it even better, but you can't have everything like you want. Now, I really have to give a huge thank you to Amiga Island, because when they suggested this, and I just sort of had a quick look at it and thought, yeah, it's probably all right to cover. I'll have a look. But then again, I started worrying about it, but now I'm absolutely hooked on it. It's amazing. It's probably one of the greatest games I've played so far, and that's coming after like the Amazing Desert Strikes, and I'm still playing that, by the way. I love that game to bits. It's absolutely fantastic. But this is just something else. It's really involving. It really draws you in. It's nice and easy to play. I mean, I would suggest you just get your hands on a copy, get an ADF, something like that. Even if you have to do it on emulate, just play it for about half an hour, because you'll pretty much see, even after the first two quests, what the game's about and what you need to do. And I think it'll be enough to draw you in. You'll probably lose several hours to it, so don't blame me for that. So highly recommended. With that, I think we shall finish the podcast there. As always, thanks for listening, guys. There will be gameplay footage over on AMIGArama.com. I do that for everything I'm covering these days. It's quite a task, actually, but it's quite enjoyable because it means I'm going to get to spend even more time with this. I will start a fresh character. Then again, maybe I should start the later ones and wind you all up just so you get to see the ending. Anyway, until next time.